I had learned silence, been rewarded for it because I was easy to work with. When you have no needs or demands of your own, you're a great team player, right? People want you on your team because also they can pass your work off as their own. It's great for them. And we're told that that's what it means to be a good team player. And then we're passed over for promotion. Our own needs aren't getting met. I was sitting around sort of waiting my turn, thinking, how long am I supposed to wait? How much more do I have to prove myself? When I know that I'm actually the one holding this all together. I spent more than a decade teaching the skills and concepts of getting to yes in difficult conversations, these fundamental core tools, and noticed a pattern as I worked on 6 continents and across industries and different levels of seniority. Some people still don't negotiate. Some people still don't have the difficult conversations. Some people still don't give and receive feedback no matter how much their manager or HR told them they should, no matter whether they took the training that we think is solid. What gives? Because the answer can't just be you're doing it wrong, go fix yourself, which is how I landed on silence. Right? In what role does silence play on our teams, in our lives, and in our leadership? In what ways might I have learned silence and be self-silencing, withholding my thoughts, insights, and expertise for a number of different reasons? In what ways might the well-intentioned people around me be silencing me as they say, you're the best, we love you, keep doing what you're doing, you're so invaluable, and their actions tell us a different story. If voice is more than the words we say in a meeting, voice is how we move through the world, then you can only figure out what your voice is and use it by acting. You can't do it in theory.
Today, I'm speaking with Elaine Lin Hering, a fellow Harvard Law grad turned negotiation expert, global facilitator, and now author of Unlearning Silence, How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. But more than that, she's someone who's learned what it costs to stay silent, even when you're outwardly succeeding. We talk about the lies that we've internalized about what it means to be diplomatic, the difference between silence and discernment, and how we reclaim voice in systems that can reward our invisibility. This convo will resonate with anyone else out there who's ever been praised for being easy to work with, but was left wondering why they're still feeling overlooked or burnt out. Let's dive in. Elaine, welcome. I've been following your LinkedIn posts. I think that we actually found each other through LinkedIn. So thank you, algorithm. Thank you, Reid Hoffman, for making this podcast possible. And I just loved what you were posting out there, both about your own journey towards stepping into your purpose, but also about your book and stepping into your voice and guidance for others to do the same. So for listeners who are new to you, new to your work, who are you and what moved you to write this book, Unlearning Silence, now?
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that the algorithm connected us because we went to the same law school. Sort of like we're in the ether, are both not practicing law, and it apparently took social media to connect us. So for all that that world can be, I am grateful for it.
Yeah, there is beauty even in the darkness and chaos and all of that.
Totally, we're going to embrace the bright spots. I went to law school intending to be a litigator. You know, from the time I was 11, I said I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I was that driven, precocious maybe, child and teenager who went after it, went after the dream. And my premise was if you speak law, it's like speaking another language. You have access to a different world, and that can be powerful.
Yes.
I arrived at Harvard Law School and got a sense of what real legal practice might be like, both in classes and then in summering at big law firms over the summer. In parallel to that, took the negotiation workshop. And it was this, wait, we can talk about things? What a novel idea. Emotions are data. They're part of the process. What? These are all the things I did not learn growing up. So I really threw myself into the ADR, alternative dispute resolution world, trying to learn everything I could, these skill sets that I didn't learn in the family and in the culture and the context that I grew up in. Turns out most of us don't actually learn them, so I wasn't actually that alone. But the question for me became, other than sue each other and blow each other up, what can we do? turns out a whole hell of a lot in terms of actually having the conversation, in terms of looking at why we don't have the conversations, in what are the different tools and approaches that might help us learn a skill set that most of us did not learn at home and most of us did not learn in school.
And even at Harvard Law School, actually, outside of the negotiation program. So, for people who don't know, Harvard has an innovative, highly acclaimed negotiation program. It's one of the most, I guess, like coveted popular classes
Mm.
in the law school. There's folks from the business school, from other schools across Harvard, plus a lot of executive education opportunities too. And one of the things that I always found really interesting about the negotiation program is that for my friends who took it, sadly, I never like figured out how to get in. It seemed to be like one of the only places, to your point, where there was room to talk about emotion, where there was room to really talk about relationship. Those were, almost like embarrassing, dirty words, forbidden concepts in the study and practice of law generally. So, like, emotion is something to be taken advantage of, it is
Mm.
something to be suppressed, repressed, unless it is to be used as a weapon in
As
some
a
way.
tool and manipulated. And I will say that in the years of being a student and then joining the faculty later, there has been a shift, right? This acknowledgement of emotions aren't just to be manipulated. That if you want to get a good deal on this deal that you're crafting, you actually need to acknowledge the human side and how people are feeling. And
Mm,
that's an evolution that I saw just in my 10, 15 years from going from student to faculty member. That's all to say there's still so much more to do, but it is much more accepted than I
mm,
think when we started out as students. And
definitely.
part of the ethos of the Harvard negotiation program and sort of that world is continuous learning. So even if it is held up as this world-class destination for learning, and I can put all the asterisks there of it's still a system and it's still made by humans and it still has its own incentives. Part of the ethos is what are we missing and how do we get better at this craft?
Hmm.
Which is how Unlearning Silence was born. I spent more than a decade teaching the skills and concepts of getting to yes in difficult conversations, these fundamental core tools from that body of work and that group of people, and noticed a pattern as I worked on 6 continents and across industries and different levels of seniority. Some people still don't negotiate. Some people still don't have the difficult conversations. Some people still don't give and receive feedback no matter how much their manager or HR told them they should, no matter whether they took the training that we think is solid. What gives?
Hmm.
Because the answer can't just be you're doing it wrong, go fix yourself, which is how I
Yes.
landed on silence. Right? In what role does silence play on our teams, in our lives, and in our leadership? In what ways might I have learned silence and be self-silencing, withholding my thoughts, insights, and expertise for a number of different reasons? In what ways might the well-intentioned people around me be silencing me, even if, as they say, Allie, you're the best. We love you. Keep doing what you're doing. You're so invaluable. And their actions tell us a different story. And of course, there's the backdrop of all the practices and policies that are baked into the systems that we're all part of.
I think what drives many of us to law, to your point, was understanding how power works.
Mm.
But also it's like, oh, we're good writers, we're good
Mm.
communicators. And for myself, for a really long time, I prided myself that one of my 10x skills was being incredibly diplomatic.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think, while there is a lot to be said for learning how to communicate in a way that you can be heard even by someone who might have a very different perspective, if I'm
Mhm.
being honest, there's a lot of ways that I was self silencing and that
Yeah.
I was not communicating authentically, that I was not clearly stating my needs, my priorities, my boundaries. So as you're talking about, highly skilled people, I'm like, oh man, I can negotiate a 10-figure
Yeah.
deal for
Yeah.
someone else,
Yes.
but can I speak up for myself? It doesn't necessarily compute. So,
And we, of course, layer on gender to that.
mhm. Gender, ethnicity,
All of it, any
religious, cultural
subordinated
background. Yep.
identity, when you're not part of the dominant group, it's inherently an uphill battle, and the advice given us that I found so unsatisfying and felt, frankly, not out of integrity in regurgitating is if the advice isn't working for you, it must be you. Versus, no, where is the advice coming from? What vantage point of the world does it come from? What privileges are embedded in it? And so
Mm-hmm.
if it's not working, let's continue to ask the question of what gives, what might be missing. And for me, silence was that big missing piece. You're saying I can negotiate an 8, 9, 10-figure deal, whatever it is, for someone else. Well, yes, because you are working on behalf of them, right? You're the
Mm-hmm.
agent, you're not the principal, if we're going to go in technical terms. That diplomacy has been sold to us as a net positive, as a
Mm-hmm.
net neutral. And I say this as a trained mediator, that as a mediator, we're supposed to be neutrals. There's a whole industry of professional neutrals.
Neutrals.
Nothing is neutral. Nothing is neutral. How we facilitate those conversations impacts the end outcome,
Mm.
impacts who gets heard, who doesn't get heard. But it also takes us wrestling with the framings that are presented to us like we're neutral. We're diplomatic. We get to feel good about that versus
Mm-hmm.
what might we be missing for ourselves. And then as a result of the cultures that we create in taking on those roles.
Is there a moment that you can share when you realized that silence had a personal cost for you?
I think I always knew. I just didn't have language for it.
Mm.
And I approached the world in this stance of, I think it was couched as humility, of let me learn from the best in the world. You go to a place like Harvard and you're like, oh, it's little old me. I'm the first in my family, all these things. Let me
Mm-hmm.
learn from those who know more than me. And then there is a, well, let's really look at what's being taught and see whether it makes sense, because I also have been gifted a brain of my own and a heart of my own. So let me use that. You fast forward. So there's this sort of like deep undercurrent of discomfort of something's not right, but maybe I'm the one who's not getting it, right? That self-doubt comes into play.
Yeah.
And then the moment that I recall most clearly is 2020. I was in the side yard between the garbage cans and our home, taking out the trash bag in hand, and probably baby like strapped to my body, as you do. And George Floyd had been murdered. People were out on the streets protesting, and it felt like if you weren't out on the streets protesting, you were a bad person. I wasn't using
Mm-hmm.
my voice. And I thought, I'm breastfeeding a child. My father's in the hospital getting a bone marrow transplant and doing chemo. I don't feel in my family system like I can do that responsibly, taking care of the people that I feel responsible for taking care of and want to take care of.
Yes.
And so if so, A, am I a bad person? B, do I not have a voice? And it was then that I realized voice has been synonymous to speaking up loudly in meetings, preferably in 3 succinct bullet points and no ums, and just the right amount of emotion to show that you care, but not too much that people don't take you seriously, particularly if you present as a woman.
Yeah, you better not get red in the face, get any tears in your
No,
eyes. You better not
no.
care that much. You have to care a lot, but you better not care that much.
Let's just breathe through that one, right? And that to me was, there's been this really narrow definition of voice. Either you need to be screaming with a bullhorn or you're just a bad person, versus there are so many different ways that we might use our voices, that we might contribute meaningfully to the world, that we might share our thoughts, insights, and expertise.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just that I needed to speak up louder or more clearly the way that leadership development, that industry might tell me to. It was that I've actually learned to stay silent. I'm the youngest daughter of an immigrant family from Taiwan to the United States. I grew up in the Christian church.
Mm-hmm.
I share all of that because in my family of origin, if you ask a question, you push back, you have a difference of opinion, that's disrespectful, right? Children should be seen and not
You're not
heard.
heard. Oh, yep. I grew up in an immigrant family, and I'm like, I can't tell you how many times I was told that by my dad, my grandparents, my aunties, and uncle, everyone.
Yes, and we regurgitate it, right? Because that's how we were raised, and we're both parents. So there are days now where I'm like, oh, I get that. I actually
Like,
we
everybody
need to
needs to
shut
turn down the volume.
silence, please, right? But I had learned silence, been rewarded for it because as an entry-level person, I was easy to work with. When you have no needs or
Mm.
demands of your own, you're a great team player, right? People want you on your team because also they can pass your work off as their own. It's great for them.
Wait, let's just pause there too, because I think that I know
Flashbacks?
I'm feeling a big moment of self-recognition, and I imagine some of our listeners might be feeling the same way.
And we're told that that's what it means to be a good team player.
Mm.
And then we're passed over for promotion. Our own needs aren't getting met. I was sitting around sort of waiting my turn, thinking, how long am I supposed to wait? How much more do I have to prove myself when I know that I'm actually the one holding this all together?
Yeah, we're told we lack leadership skills and executive presence. I don't know. I'm just quoting from my law firm professional development review.
Right. And let's be clear, from an analytical standpoint, that analysis is extremely beneficial to the people who are already in power and to the systems that serve them.
Mm-hmm.
Because it also means that they don't have any responsibility they need to take in us not getting heard and our needs not getting met, right? If it's a Allie Elaine problem and we just need to go find more courage or build more confidence, the people around us, the managers, the partners don't have to change. Versus, look, there are things I need to own about the silence I've learned. I could be more clear, direct. Or maybe there are some times where I have told the story and complained so much to the people around me that I start to believe that I've actually had the conversation when I haven't. That's on me. That's on me. I will own that illusory
Yes.
truth effect at work. Okay. But in what ways are even well-intentioned leaders silencing the very people they want to lead, claim to support, like, tell me what you really think. But
Mm,
then when you take the risk to share that, they're like, oh, no, 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 don't worry about that. It's not a big deal. You're overreacting.
yes. And that's one of the things that I loved about your book, because I think that sometimes in the discourse around silence, we say, okay, well, it's your fault that you're not speaking up. And you know what? There are a lot of, like, we're adults now. So, yes, we were raised in cultures and whatever. So, like, we do need to take responsibility. And, like, there was some wisdom to
Yeah.
that professional development review around leadership skills and executive presence and saying what I need to say, having an opinion,
Mhm.
stating it clearly and appropriately forcefully. And yeah, we need to be aware of all of the other structures and environmental conditions that are around that too. If you're just talking about one and not the other, it's never going to work.
It's never going to work. And I think we as humans are inclined toward quick fixes, right? The
Mm-hmm.
30-day slim fast challenge that's going to solve all of your problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's sexy, that's attractive versus, no, here's the deep work and the complexity that is there. That if we
Yes.
really want to be heard, really want to honor the dignity of every human being, it's going to take more than one person. And we each
Mm,
play a different role and have a different part of the puzzle. That's not as sexy and easy to sell.
yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
I'd argue, more accurate.
It's more accurate, but it's harder, right? It's more overwhelming. The idea of, okay, where do I even start?
Mhm.
So what I really love is how you've talked about in your family of origin and then in educational systems and professional environments, there are a lot of ways that we were rewarded for
Mhm.
restraint. And then there are other contexts. So, for instance, you talk about 2020, there's the protests around the murder of George Floyd. And, I was in many progressive environments in New York City. And, if you weren't speaking up, if you weren't putting your body on the line, I also had I think, 6-month-old son at the time in the middle of a pandemic. And, I'll be honest, I also did not feel comfortable being out there in the streets with a baby strapped to me with all of the things that were going on. So there are times when silence or when not expressing oneself is wise,
Mhm.
is an expression of discernment. And there's times when it comes from fear, when it comes from socialization. How can people know? Like, what are some of the signs that people can see in themselves to know when they're choosing one or the other? Sometimes we know, but sometimes we also like rationalize, in
Yeah.
either direction.
Yes. So for folks who want cliff notes and citations, this is chapter 3 of my book, When Silence Makes Sense. And the punchline, to start there and then go back up to signs, the punchline is The difference between silence that is additive or strategic and silence that is damaging or oppressive is agency.
Mm.
Are you choosing it or is it chosen for you? Because unlearning silence using your voice does not mean saying everything everywhere to everyone all the time. The world is far too noisy for that. It lacks, as you say, discernment and wisdom and strategy and intention. Some of the signs are, am I choosing this? Have I even made a conscious decision? Because so much of learned silence is it's just calcified habits. Whenever I see a man in his 60s, I immediately have a flashback to that person in my life, that uncle, that my dad, whatever it is. And so I shrink back to a 6-year-old version of myself versus the grown up that I am today.
Mm.
Right. And that for me is so powerful, particularly in geography. I live near UC Berkeley. I was back on campus. I'm now guest faculty there. We went to the faculty club for faculty dinner with some students. And being back in that room, I felt like, oh, here I am back in college. And I was like, oh, wait, I'm actually the faculty member that these students are, it's 20 something, it's years later. But
Mm-hmm.
do we flash back to the patterns that are so familiar to us? I'd also argue that comfort is not a sign of what is good or bad, right or wrong. Comfort is just a sign of what's familiar. And
Mm-hmm.
fear can be useful, right? But am I letting my fears control me, or am I choosing a response, an action, a next step in light of an awareness of my fears?
Yeah.
There's a conscious intentionality there that means that silence isn't just the default, but that silence, I am doing it for strategic reason, like my family's immune systems right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's coupled, though, with a broader definition of voice. So to your question of what are some of the signs, it's that I'm just going on autopilot. I haven't actually stopped to think. I haven't chosen this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that trap of thinking, I don't have a choice. We hear that so much right now. I have no power. I have no choice. No, we have choices. The choices may not be good or appealing,
Yeah.
which begs the question in classic negotiation world, how do you make those choices better, right? How do you improve
Mm.
your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement?
Mm-hmm.
The choices may not be appealing, but we still have a choice. The other trap I see people focusing on is what are the short-term costs versus the potential long-term benefits.
Mm. I think this is one for like our entire culture, not just us. It's like the whole thing, right?
Yes, coupled with immediate gratification culture, right?
Yeah.
So we're not looking at a purview of 10, 20, 50 years. We're looking at 10 seconds, and that already
Mm.
feels too long. So the sign is I'm focused on the now. The costs of using my voice right now feel high. My palms get sweaty.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this, right? I'm already back to back on meetings. My kid is already crying. My dog is walking through. Amazon is delivering something, right? I don't have time to have this conversation right now. And my
Mm-hmm.
body doesn't want to. Okay, that's all
Mm-hmm.
now. The sign is I'm focused on the now versus what's going to happen if I don't say something now. So that same behavior is probably going to go on. It's not going to fix itself, even though we tell ourselves it might.
Mm-hmm. We just hope someone else will say something or they'll realize and they'll stop.
Yes, they're going to have this dramatic moment that Shonda Rhimes orchestrated with the music cresting in the back and an epiphany, and they will say, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so sorry. Like, that's not how it works in real life.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't say something or do something different, the likelihood of it continuing and repeating is pretty high.
Yeah.
We focus on the cost of saying something now. Well, what's the cost of not saying something? Well, we're also probably staying awake at night, insomnia, spinning, spiraling. There's energy consumption happening there too.
Yeah. And I think that many people can relate to that. Like
Mm,
I remember when I was feeling like I needed to leave my job, feeling like I needed to make a big change. There was such a high cost
mhm.
to not having the conversation. It took me a while to even just name my needs. And actually,
Yeah.
once I did, my CEO at the time, he was
Mm,
actually very open to it. He was like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that you're so miserable. And I do want to help you solve this. And, let's do XYZ together." But I had spent months with this feeling like literally eating me up inside and then also creating a narrative around my, oh, no one cares. Or, I would say insane, oh, I'll be happy in the next life.
I'm glad you're still here in
I'm
this
glad I'm
life.
still here in this life. Yes. And I'm glad I'm happy now. But
Right.
there's just, we say, oh, I can't possibly, but we also like can't possibly continue in that way.
Yes. And also, where does that I can't possibly share this with my CEO come from?
How old am I? Right. I got this from internal family systems work when you talked
Sure.
about yourself at the faculty club taking the
Yeah.
students out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that very often, yes, when we have the I can't possibly or I have to or whatever, all of a sudden that's probably a good sign. You're like, okay, so this is a framework or a rule that I picked
Yep.
up somewhere. How
Yes.
old was I when I first started feeling this
Yeah.
way? I'm like, oh, 5 or 6. Is
Yes.
that the mind that I want to be making decisions from? Probably
Notice
not.
how conscious that is, though, right? That's a conscious choice to ask, how old am I? Was I?
Hmm.
And do I still want to be showing up in that way? Those are conscious choices that we forget that we have in the moment. The other piece of it is we don't necessarily know how the conversation is going to go with them, the other person, with the CEO in your case, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we often fixate on worst case scenario. And so there's the flip of, okay, we're so focused very naturally as human beings as a matter of self-preservation on what's the worst that can happen.
Yeah,
Well, we don't ask the question, what's the best that could happen?
right.
In part because we don't know. But even that withholding of judgment to say, I don't actually know what they're going to say. Then, from a very tactical perspective, there's how do I raise it? Which is, hey, CEO, here, I want to share some things that have been swirling in my head. I don't want you to fix it. I'm not looking to you to have a solution today. I actually just want you to think with me through it.
Mm,
Is one, right? You've given them a clear role so that when they start to overreact or fix, you can anchor back to, no, today I just wanted to think together,
yeah.
right? To strategize or get it off my chest. I don't, whatever it is that would actually serve you in the moment, ask for that. I think there's the other
Mm,
micro move of let me share the worries that I have, right? Hey, CEO, I worry that you won't think that I'm committed. I worry that you'll lose trust in me. And because of those worries, I haven't wanted to share. At the same time, here's what I want to share and here's what I want you to do about it, right?
yeah.
But the beauty of it is that actually naming our worries humanizes us to the other person.
Yes.
And most times the empathy from them kicks in of like, no, 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 no. Right. I, of course, wouldn't think less of you. Or they
Mm-hmm.
know, well, that's the worst outcome. Let me not go there.
Yeah.
And so instead of letting all that just spin and spiral in our heads, bringing it into the conversation because it's a piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah, and I think that those micro moves, I've done 1 or 2 of them at different points, but they were so insanely powerful in the way that they all of a sudden create space around the conversation, around the topic of the conversation, both
Mm-hmm.
for the person who's raising the issue as maybe, again, I'll just talk about myself. I'll go into that conversation like, okay, so I'm going to quit because like this is terrible and there's nothing that I can do. And to just say, actually, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'll be honest. I've had thoughts of quitting, but
Mm-hmm.
I really don't want to do that. Can we put our heads together about ways that we can shift things? And
Yeah.
then you're right, the empathy immediately triggers. And the other person, yeah, it like shifts the power dynamic quite a bit too. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love that suggestion.
I'm also noticing in how you shared your example with your CEO that we so often end up writing their narrative for them, right? Sort of filling in what they're going to say. And when I work with clients, I'm often working on, you need to share your own perspective because if you don't own your own voice, someone else will own it for you.
Mm,
But how often do we actually preempt all of that such that they don't have an opportunity to show up well in our lives because we've already decided that they're going to be this horrible version of themselves. And then they get mad at us for making them a horrible version of themselves. But as a matter of control, we've decided this is what's going to happen versus here's what I actually know, here's what I don't know. Right? I don't actually know how my CEO is going to react yet. If I have the conversation and they react in that way, then sure, we've got more data. But can I go get myself some fresh data and accurate data
yeah.
before I draw a conclusion or change the course of my career based on some assumptions, a role that I assigned to someone that they may or may not want.
Yes. No, as you're saying this, I am realizing that I learned this part of it the hard way actually when I
Mm.
left the law firm. And so I left as it was a third year, fourth year, I don't know, something like that. And there was a partner who was really close with, I tried to be staffed on as many matters of his as possible because he was just brilliant
Mm,
and much kinder than the average partner and really, invested in my growth and success. Amazing in-house opportunity presented itself, and then it sort of took on a life of its own.
mm,
And I didn't bring him along until I went into his office to tell him that I was giving notice.
mm.
And he actually had tears in his eyes because he was like, I'm
I
not going to
thought.
try to change your mind because it's clear that you've made a
Mhm,
decision, but I
mhm,
really wish that we could have talked
mhm,
about this along the way.
mhm,
Because I wouldn't necessarily have tried to make you stay, but I really wish that I could have advised you on these opportunities and maybe even help you negotiate something. And I realized it wasn't just robbing
mm,
him of the opportunity to help me, but I was actually robbing myself of the opportunity to benefit from all of his experience and his wisdom and his connections and all of these things that I realized I was like, "Oh, he wants to share that with me." I had
mhm.
just assumed, "Oh, he's gonna be so pissed that I'm leaving, so I'm just gonna wait until the last possible second to tell him."
Yeah. And the piece I hear in that is, could we have given him a role in the process that would have also made you feel comfortable enough to bring him into the process?
Mm,
Right? Like he's gonna be so mad, or I've been in similar situations where I'm like, they're gonna tell me what to do, or then I have to manage another stakeholder and someone else's reactions. I just can't deal with that
yes.
now, right? So I just wanna honor that part of ourselves that's like, "Let me do my thing. Let me," and then tell you afterwards because I can't deal with all of this. And yes, the cost of that is maybe not being able to tap into someone else's expertise. But we've also all had experiences in our lives, I would imagine, where, well, we thought we were going to benefit from your expertise, but then you really like hijacked my whole process. And now I'm making a decision based off of something else and not really listening to myself. And so, how can I give you a role
Mm,
in that that I am
mhm.
okay with and that you can engage in this process if you sign up for that role?
So what would you have done? I feel like this is
Mm.
actually, like, an interesting case study for listeners.
Hey, partner, I have so appreciated working with you. As you know, I care deeply about my growth and my successes. I know you do. I've been approached with this really exciting opportunity, and I'm considering it. I am curious what you would think. And one of the reasons I hesitated to raise this at all is because I know you've invested so much in me. And so I worry that you might have your own objectives when I'm really trying to figure out what is right for me. So
Mm,
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this with the agreement and understanding that at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision that's right for me and my family and my life. And that my decision is not at all a judgment on how much I value you or respect you. Is that a conversation we could have?
Stephen, if you're listening, that's what I meant to tell you in 2016.
To be clear, it's so much easier when you're not the person in the moment, right? Which is also whether it's a friend or a podcast, having those thought partners of a different way of having the conversation to at least consider. And also, we all have our own journeys to get there. Right? So I wouldn't judge your past self so harshly, so much as that's the iteration that you had at that time. And if in the future you're considering another career pivot or move, you might have different conversations, different people in your lives.
Yeah. No, it's an opportunity to learn, right? Like we are here to be with experiences and learn from them. So, again, as type A perfectionists, sometimes we can forget that and just beat ourselves up. But actually, how do people try to repair when our attempts to speak up don't land exactly the way that we might have hoped?
When you say repair, what do you mean?
So maybe I'll just take that example of, talking to my partner, Stephen, when I left.
Let me give you my favorite and maybe your favorite answer as a lawyer. It depends. Because it does. Right? Do
Mm,
you want to repair? How much does that relationship matter to
matter.
you?
Yep.
Is that where you wanna put time and energy? Right? There can be these really categorical, binary, you must always repair because that's what good people in the world do, approaches to life. I don't buy into them because I think it's just more
Mm,
complex. We each have
mhm.
limited bandwidth, and so it's a question of where do you wanna spend that bandwidth? How much questions I would be asking is, how much is this weighing on you? How much emotional, mental, relational bandwidth is it taking up, even if you're not actively engaged with them?
Yeah.
What relationship do you want to have with them? Are you looking for repair? Do you think there's enough in the relationship there that you could trust it? And I'm thinking in particular, it sounds like you and Steve had a good, positive working relationship, but I'm thinking about the workplaces that many of us have exited where it's like, actually, I don't need that in my life. It's not healthy in my life. Or in order to be in relationship with you, I need to be a version of myself that I'm not.
Mm.
And if so, the boundary of not being in touch, I'd argue, is actually healthier. And the repair is internal.
Yes.
Iterations that I've had of this very conversation with my partner, my husband, he's like, well, is there anything that you would say to them
Hmm.
that you haven't already said? And I'm like, no. And just because I've said it doesn't mean that they heard
They've
it.
received, right?
But whether or not someone receives the message isn't on us, it's on them. Our responsibility is, have we said everything that we need to say or that we hope they hear? That is coupled with, in this situation, it reminds me that a relationship is not a one-shot deal. It's not any one moment in time. You might go back and say, hey, I was thinking about when I took that job and when I left the firm. And in hindsight, I wish I had done this.
Mm.
And I wish that I had told you how much I valued your mentorship, your sponsorship. And so to the extent that that actually landed with you as disrespect, I want to own that and apologize for that.
Mm.
And they might say, look, it's business, it's not personal.
Yeah.
That's fine. But it's sort of like, can you live with yourself? Have you made peace with yourself in how you'd handled it? And I have gone back 4 years later to have a conversation with someone, which is like, you know what? I don't know if you remember it. And
But this
often
thing
they do. Often they do, because they've also been spinning
Yep.
and spiraling. Going back to our perfectionist tendencies, I don't think we can hold ourselves to that perfectionist tendency in the moment. But
Mm.
as we grow in wisdom, if there are ways that we want to show up or wish that we had shown up differently, why not own it?
Yes. No,
And
that's maturity.
that could be having the conversation with them. That could be, I don't need to have the conversation with them because it's actually about me.
Mm.
And I've reconciled that with myself, former self and current self. And look at how much I've grown.
Yes. So just switching gears a bit, what did you personally have to unlearn to write this book?
What didn't I have to unlearn?
You're like, that's why I wrote the book. The book is the
I'm not
journey.
even joking. I mean, everyone says writing a book turns you inside out. Writing a book on unlearning your silence while unlearning your silence is next level.
Mm.
While raising a child and trying to not silence them, next level.
Mhm.
But I kid you not, I didn't know that I had a voice. I didn't know that I had a voice. I spent so much of my career channeling other people's voices, building their brands, building their business, right? That's how I was rewarded. I was a very good imitation of someone else.
Mm.
And what you lose in that is a sense of self and really giving up the power that you have from the uniqueness that you bring to the world. And it was really as I looked at this body of content that's held up worldwide as best practice, I thought, well, I know it pretty deeply, right? I'm teaching it from the inside for more than I know it and I see the holes. And so I want to add to this, and people may or may not agree with me. I am no longer with the firm, right? That maybe fills in some gaps for people, and that voice is costly. There is the level of, is this going to resonate with anyone? Is there a there? Am I just thinking too highly of myself that I have something to add to this, world-class body of knowledge? And then started talking about it and literally saying the title of my book, Unlearning Silence. Some people were like, wait, hold on, I need a minute.
Wow.
Right? Because we have been gaslit into thinking it's us and it's a confidence, courage problem versus no, silence is there, it's present, and we can choose a relationship with it. But we have to be
Mm.
conscious of it. Otherwise, it just perpetuates the status quo and the defaults. And of course, when Penguin picked up the book, it was like, oh, I guess there's something here,
Yeah.
right? I was very much of the mindset of, let me just give it a shot. And if no publisher's interested, then I'm no worse off than I
Mm.
was before I tried. I didn't know I could write. I'd written 30-page term papers, but I'd never written a full-length book.
Book, yeah.
And so it wasn't until I signed off of the manuscript and I read the book I had written as a book that I was like, oh, this is pretty good.
You're like, that's cool. Good job, Elaine.
I know. Well, I wrote my editor, Meg, and I was like, Meg, I think I can write. And she said some professional version of like, no shit, Sherlock. Yeah, but it really has been a journey. And it has also taught me that voice isn't a flip that you switch on and off.
Mm.
If voice is more than the words we say in a meeting, voice is how we move through the world, then you can only figure out what your voice is and use it by action, by acting. You can't do it in theory.
Yes.
And the beautiful thing about action is we think about, let me take this action and people are going to judge me and then they're going to think it's horrible and they're going to be like, what crap are you making up? That's the wait, what's the worst that can happen? Right? I'm going to get canceled. I don't know. Whatever, Tucker Carlson's going to come after me, whatever it is. We don't look at what's the best that can happen, which I would argue really has been the course of my life of random people on different continents I've never met. I have no idea how you found me or Unlearning Silence, writing me to say, I read your book and it changed my life. I read your book and I felt so seen and heard and valued in a way that no one in my workplace does to me.
Mm.
Who, you know what? Your book finally gave me the courage to leave the marriage that I knew I needed to leave. And I am 2 years into solopreneurship, figuring out how I want to do business in the world. Who do I want to work with? What net terms do I want to have? What impact do I want to have? Who am I going to work with? Who am I not going to work with?
Mm.
I have so much more clarity about how I want to show up in the world and how I get to show up in the world. And that I couldn't have done in theory. I couldn't have imagined that it could be as rich and complex and wonderful as it is. But that has been my journey so far with Unlearning Silent, which is, wow, I guess I have a voice. And what I'm thinking that I'm editing out is I better darn use it, which is sort of that like 12-year-old version. There's a more compassionate version, but I feel that weight.
Mm.
And, I wrote the book before today when we're recording it, when silence is much more in the headlines from all different people.
Mhm.
And when, Dr. Todd Rose from Harvard is saying 2/3 of people are self-silencing for fear of repercussion. And those fears are well-founded, well-grounded, and based in reality. And also focused on the short term and focused on ourselves versus the broader impact of what are we building together? What community, what world do I want to be a part of? And how might I choose an action today that leads us more toward the world I want to be a part of? Now, to be
Mm.
clear, I'm still not a stand on the street corner with a bullhorn sort of person, but I am hey, I see you on the street. Let me say, morning. Hope you have a good day.
Mm.
Which is a micro moment of I see your humanity. I want to honor it. I want to be in connection and community rather than just robots moving through the world, right? In the world of AI, that humanity is the differentiator that still makes us valuable and necessary. It makes us human.
Mm.
So what are the choices we can make in how we show up in our day-to-day interactions that builds more of the world we want?
Elaine, I think that is like the perfect note to
Hmm.
end on. Such an inspiring message for all of us. Where can people find Unlearning Silence and how can they follow along with your work?
Yeah, you can find Unlearning Silence wherever books are sold in all the different formats and now I think we're up to 9 translations in terms of languages. German just came out last month. You can hang out with me and Allie on LinkedIn. The handle is Elaine Lin Hering. And of course, if you want tips and strategies straight to your inbox, I've got a free newsletter that you can snag from my website, elainelinhering.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elaine. This has just been such a fantastic conversation. Thank you again to the algorithm for bringing us
Oh,
together.
thanks, Allie.